Please welcome Kilian Hennessy, founder, By Killian.
Good morning, everyone. So first, I would like to thank WWD for inviting me to speak among such great speakers today. When I met Pete for the first time, and he asked me to talk about what I care the most, and about what keeps me up at night. So usually, forgot to have a clicker. So usually, when I start talking about myself and talking about the brand, I used to say, well, I don't know how much you know about the brand, I don't know how much you know about myself, but I have a pure perfume background. Well, the truth is that my background is actually in semiotics and sciences of communications, kind of far. But it's actually semiology and semiotics who got me into the world of perfume. And that's the thing about connecting the dots. You can only connect them looking backwards, not looking forwards. So I have always a lot of admiration for those who can actually see change, because I actually feel that in my case, I tend to follow my heart more than sometimes what I really rationally think. So actually, I did a school named Le CELSA, which is part of Paris 4 Sorbonne. And during my 5th year in college, we had to write a thesis. So in the French traditional academic system, when you write a thesis, you have to start by a question left unanswered by previous theses. And for a reason that is still unclear to me today, I chose perfume. So as you can understand, perfume and semiotics, there's not so many theses written before me. But when I started reading all the few theses written, they all came back to the same question, which was the impossibility to have a common vocabulary when we talk about a scent. There is no common vocabulary when we talk about perfume. And of course, so here I am, like Don Quixote, with my impossible thesis to write. So that was the title of the thesis. And luckily for me, I had access at that time to a man who was going to become my mentor. His name is Maurice Roger. Maurice Roger was the president of Dior from 1982 to 1996. We owe him, in the perfume world, perfumes like Poison, Dune, Fahrenheit, Dolce Vita, just to name a few. And Maurice gave me the best advice possible, which was, if I was serious enough about writing a thesis on the language of scents, I needed to learn perfume like a perfumer. Maurice introduced me then to Cinquième Sens, which is a school that introduces you to the world of perfume. It is not totally complete, but it's a great first introduction. So I did Cinquième Sens in parallel with my 5th year in college, quite a busy year. And Maurice introduced me then to Jacques Cavalier. Jacques Cavalier, when I met him back in the days, he was a very young perfumer. He just finished L'Odyssée Miyake and Jean-Paul Gaultier. Jacques Cavalier, for those who don't know, he's today the in-house perfumer for Louis Vuitton. And with Jacques, I went from knowing 300 ingredients to knowing 3,000 ingredients. Jacques was literally my biggest mentor. I also had another mentor, very important, named Thierry Vasseur. Thierry Vasseur is today the house perfumer for Guerlain. And with him, I learned all the basic accords, but also more importantly, I learned every perfume on the market from a formula standpoint, which allowed me, in my years afterwards, when I was receiving trials from perfumers, I was able to say what in the accord would allow me to bring novelty and what in the accord was actually bringing classic or was reminding me of a perfume that already existed. So before creating By Killian in 2007, I worked for 10 years in the perfume industry. I worked for a little bit more than 3 years for Paco Rabanne until I resigned to join the Gucci group, working with Chantal Ross. And I worked for McQueen for almost 3 years until I resigned again to join the L'Oréal group, where I worked for Giorgio Armani until I resigned again. And so you must be asking yourself, why in hell is he talking about Saint-Simon? So Saint-Simon was a writer under Louis XIV, and he said that sentence that we French people are kind of based into, which is ridicule is more dishonorable than dishonor. Well, as you probably have noticed, French people are very proud people. And you can imagine that leaving a big cosmetic group where you have a career in front of you and say no to an amazing career to start your own brand, you don't want to fail, you don't want to look ridiculous. But honestly, so that's my emoji. But honestly, the decade I had lived from 1995 to 2005 was so far from what I believed or what I was taught, what was the true perfumery. You know, when you start in the industry, you always look back to the decade before you. And 1985, 1995, for me, that was one of the best decades in the perfume industry. 1985 is Poison from Dior, Obsession from Calvin Klein, and then you go all the way through Eternity, Escape, CK1, all the Dior perfumes, Saint Laurent. I mean, it is the greatest time. Angel, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Miyake. I mean, it is an explosion of creativity, 1985, 1995. And frankly, the decade I was working on, the decade I have built, I was not just proud of it. So I remember one day I was approached by a famous headhunter in France, and she told me, you know, Kilian, I see you very well working for Tom Ford or Heidi Slimane in the fashion world. Well, when you look at my resume, it makes absolutely no sense. I have a pure perfume background. I mean, I didn't know school, I did training with perfumers. Why in hell would I go from all this training in perfume to the fashion world? But the truth is that, actually, I said, let's make the appointment. I was really ready to leave an industry I just gave 10 years of my life. Until one night, I was actually having dinner at the Baccarat restaurant in Paris. I don't know if you've been there, it's not so good, don't try. But at that time, they were exhibiting 1 century of perfume Baccarat bottles. And when I realized what was the level of the perfume industry a century ago, I was under the shock. You know, it's one thing to see those bottles and boxes in books, but to physically have them in front of me, to see those wood coffrets with satin beddings, keys, tassels, engraved bottles, when I realized what was the quality, the luxury of the product that we, the industry, offered to customers a century ago, I was just amazed. And my faith in perfume was reborn. And actually, this perfumery that I witnessed in the Baccarat Museum that night, this level of luxury that I witnessed was exactly the perfumery I wanted to create, was exactly the perfumery that I thought customers should deserve today. And the next day, I actually gave my resignation to start Kilian, with the ambition to re-put perfumery on its pedestal in a way, to recreate a perfumery like it existed a century ago, but of course, in a way that it would look, it would feel, and would smell contemporary. In a way, a perfumery that would be essential and excessive at the same time. So, sea change. Well, in a way, what I witnessed that night, this product, if you want, or in a way, I saw in the past of perfume, the future of perfume. I saw in this beautiful coffret, tasseled and bottle, the DNA of what was going to become my first collection called L'Œuvre Noire. And L'Œuvre Noire was really meant to recreate this feeling of luxury that I witnessed, but of course done in a way that would feel and that would look contemporary. With that ambition in mind, I also looked at jeweled bottles that we used to do that gave birth to my scented jewelry collection. And those pommandeurs that existed for the home gave birth to my home collection. Which takes us to part 2, which is Be Change. So when you think about it, what has been happening in the perfume industry for the past 10 years should have happened a long time ago. It happened for makeup artist brands. It happened for Dr. brands in the skincare category. Of course, some have paved the way before me. I'm first and foremost thinking about Serge Lutens and his absolutely gorgeous, amazing Salon du Palais Royal that he created, I think, in 1992. Of course, I'm also thinking about Joe Malone, 1994. But if you go today to a department store, I was Friday in Houston in the new revamped Saks Fifth Avenue store, you have all these brands at once now, all these brands at once. I don't even know how the customer actually finds a way in this maze. But when I created the brand, one thing which was very important to me was to emerge from all those brands. And you know, our so-called niche perfume industry, which, by the way, I hate the word niche, because for those who don't know, niche means house for dogs. So not the best word in the world. But anyway, so this niche category has been built on one simple principle, which was much needed after a decade or two of celebrity perfumes, which was what's important is the juice. Let's go back to the juice. And in order to reinforce that idea, and in order to educate the customer, the perfumes were going to be called by the ingredient of the perfume, the main ingredient of the perfume. When I started my brand, I understood the necessity to have this return to the juice quality. But for me, a great perfume is a great story long before being a beautiful olfactive harmony. When you think about the origin of perfumery, you can think about L'Heure Bleue, you can think about Shalimar. I mean, I could detail about what is the creation process. But what's important is that since the origin of perfumery, there's always been a triangle between the name, the bottle, and the juice. And the three of them respond and have an echo to each other. And that's why all my names are long. I know sometimes they're very long. But for me, what was important was really to create an emotion. Just going to tell you one little anecdote. I got into Saks thanks to the creative director of Saks almost 10 years ago. His name was Teron Schaefer. And one day, I wake up and I have a long email from Teron because he just had knee surgery. And he tells me all his day leading to his surgery. And so he tells me that, you know, he has to wake up early, it's 5 o'clock, he has to go to the hospital, he's going to be put to sleep. So he's a little scared, he gets stressed. And he said, and like every day before leaving the house, I reach my bottle of Straight to Heaven, which is one of my perfume. And he looked at the name and it's like, Straight to Heaven? Maybe not today. And he said, that's the only time I haven't worn your perfume. So again, the power of words. Sorry. So when I started working on the product itself, as we all do, we start with a cost objective, a margin objective, and a retail price objective. When I started production, actually, of the product, my cost of goods had increased by 300%, and I had to retail the product by twice the most expensive product on the market. So as you can imagine, I was a little shaky at first. But that got me to two great lessons. Number one is that if the product feels luxury, then the price has to follow the feeling of luxury, you know? And the second element is that if my product was going to be truly a luxury product, then it should not and could not be disposable. That's why, since the beginning, we made all our bottles refillable. The bottle you buy is the bottle you keep all your life. You don't need to buy another bottle. You just keep refilling your existing bottle. And in that sense, we go back to our grandmother's way of using perfume when they would have the decanters with their initials engraved, and they would go back to see the perfumer who would refill the decanter. In a way, it's back to the future. The last element that was very important to me when I started the creation of the brand was to be honest with the customer. You know, we are an industry that launches, I don't know, I think the numbers keeps raising, 1,000, 2,000 new products, new launches of scents every year. I mean, it's insane when you think about it. Imagine if we have 2,000 new phones every year, 2,000 new bottles of mineral water every year. I mean, it's insane, the level of noise. So I understand the need to feel different, to be different, and to communicate to the customer that your perfume is different from everybody else. But frankly, sometimes we talk about ingredients that exist in nature, they really don't have a smell. So if we do a comparison with the food industry, for example, it would look kind of strange if you go to a restaurant and suddenly in the menu, you have a fish that you never heard about, right? And then when you ask the maitre d', oh, but what is that fish? He would tell you, oh, it's a very specific fish. We find it in the deep Indian Sea. It's exclusive to us. No other restaurant has access to it. No, you're laughing, but that's exactly what we're saying in the perfume industry. So, you know, we are an industry who has 3,000 ingredients at our disposal, yet we feel the need to invent new ones. Finally, what keeps me up at night? Well, if you talk to my wife, considering the fact that I'm up at 5, this industry is really having too many issues for me. First and foremost, how to stay relevant. So I know a lot has been said about that. So I thought, let me take a different route. Do you remember who that is?
Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style.
2.5 billion views when it launched that song. So this is an artist who basically had access, his creation had access to everyone on the planet. 2.5 billion views. Now, who knows the name of his latest creation? No one? It's called Daddy. So how can we be an icon 2 years ago, and 2 years down the road, we don't even know what this icon has created anymore? So that was very important. And since day one, when I created By Killian, it was very important to me that my brand was not going to be built on one aesthetic, but a series of collections. And that would allow me to keep the pulse to keep my finger on the pulse of the moment. L'Œuvre Noire was my first collection. It was very much built around what I truly believe and what I needed to say, what I felt the customer would want at that time, almost 10 years ago. But if you look at the industry from an olfactive standpoint in the past long time now, you cannot see that there's a tremendous desire for overly sweet, fruity scents, which made me create a collection called In the Garden of Good and Evil, which is, as you can see, a metaphor of the original sin, the myth of the original sin. And because the object of the temptation was the forbidden fruit, it was the great excuse to bring forbidden fruit, sweet perfumes in the brand. So building collections allow me to really be fine-tuning and be with the pulse of the moment. Second element that keeps me up at night, this is actually a personal obsession of me, is how to increase the perceived value of perfume. 30 years ago, when we were teenagers, we used to buy Levi's 501 for $50. $50 for Levi's 501. Today, teenagers buy jeans for $350. So this is an industry who has been able to multiply by 7 the perceived value of a product for basically the same product. Now, you're right, this one has a bit more holes. So when I hear that my perfume is expensive at $260, when I compare it to a pair of jeans at $350, it makes me wonder. It makes me question what has done the jeans industry in order to increase so significantly the perceived value of the product. And actually, the answer is in those holes, because it is creativity. And what we're seeing today with a brand like Louboutin, for example, offering nail polish at twice the price of a Dior nail polish, or a lipstick at almost 3 times the price of a lipstick by Chanel, we realize how much creativity can help us to increase the perceived value in our industry. What is a little scary today is the amount of noise and the amount of new products. So I just hope the customer will know how to navigate amongst that. And finally, last thing that doesn't really keep me up, but that makes me wonder how we can juggle everything at the same time, is how to build the brand awareness. You know, when I started, the goal was you have to be in those magazines. If you have a page in Vogue, a page in W, and Vanity Fair, in a way you had made it. Just in America, it's not enough. You have to still have those pages, but you have to be connected with all those bloggers. And when you are a young brand built on one person, and you have to be connected with all those people times 40 countries, and you still have to do your job, I just can't wait for cloning to happen. So, you know, now that we are part of the Estée Lauder group, the brand is going to go to the next level. We're going to continue to build, to invent new things. And the one thing that I really am thinking right now is how can we still be grounded in our roots, keep our DNA intact, and not feel like those roots are anchor, but be able to move away, you know, take wings in order to build the brand. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll start off, we polled the audience, sort of themed to your recent acquisition by Lauder, and asked them to respond to the question, the category, or the statement, the category that is ripest for acquisition in the next 12 months is, and there was color cosmetics with 52%. So fragrance, you're in the minority here with fragrance, but what advice would you have for companies, kind of brands, younger brands, or emerging brands looking to take this journey that you've taken with and forming and going with a big group or going with private equity? How do you kind of make that decision?
Oh my God, you really want me to have enemies here. So, I mean, honestly, you have to follow your heart and you have to know who is right for your brand. I think this is the number one advice. Because first and foremost, I think the longest you stay independent, better for you financially. But when you choose your partner, I think you have to choose the right partner for your brand. And honestly, you can witness what all the groups do and what are the real positioning of every brand. Personally, I choose the Estée Lauder group because within the DNA, they are brand builders. So this is who I wanted for my brand.
Great. And then how can we as an industry reinvigorate prestige fragrance with millennials?
I mean, when we look at what's happening in the perfume industry, there's so many happening right now. And as I was saying, for me, the most scare is I don't know how the customer actually navigates around that maze, really. So I think our job is to continue to offer real creativity, real difference to the customer. The worst that could arrive is that us, the niche perfume brand, start to look more prestige and offer less creative creations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.